So now over to Brian Young, who is the chair of Transition Salt Spring and also one of the authors of the Climate Action Plan. He's got a lot to share with you, so hang on to your chairs. Here we go, folks. Over to you, Brian. You're going to need to unmute yourself, Brian.
Good evening, everybody. I just want to make sure I'm trying a fancy way of sharing my screen. So I want to make sure, can you see the screen okay?
Yep, it's terrific. Looks good.
Awesome. So thank you very much, Gary. It's really great to have you with us here tonight, and Elizabeth as well. I noticed Laura Patrick is here, and didn't have a chance to see if Peter Grove is here, but if he is, hello and welcome. I know that most of our steering committee is here as well. So tonight, folks, marks the end of a very long journey to get this community-driven climate action plan out to you. I'm very fortunate to serve as the chair of Transition Salt Spring with a group of really amazing directors and two wonderful paid part-time staff. I'm also a commissioner on our Community Economic Development Commission. I was also, as Darlene said, one of the lead authors of the Climate Action Plan with a fabulous team. It's safe to say that we all have bonds to this beautiful place. Maybe we were born here, or maybe we've come from away. It could be that we're dying to leave here, but I'd hazard a guess that most of us want to stay. I'm here because of an uncle who raised a family here in the 1970s and who grew Jerusalem artichokes. Their lives here made me drunk with love for the idea of having a home and a plot of land where I could can beets to my nails turn purple. So just take a moment, if you're willing in your own way, to remember why you are here and what is good about this place, because tonight's presentation is basically about what we love about here and what we each need to do to keep those things safe. Basically, tonight's story goes like this. We all live in a beautiful place, but there's a bunch of stuff we're all doing that's creating growing problems for our community and the world around us. The hard news is that those changes are accelerating, and if we don't act, many of the things about here that we love will disappear. And in fact, many of those things will make it harder and harder for us to live and thrive here. Now, on the flip side, however, there's a lot we can do together. 250 recommendations is no small shopping basket. And by we, I mean all of us, governments, organizations, business, you and me rowing together as one. So let's begin. Let's start with gratitude for the growing list of funders, including many of you that are making our work possible. I noted in our stats that 50% of you are donating, and that's really amazing. So we also have to thank a growing list of foundations and other funders, including the CRD and the Salt Spring Foundation and the Allens Trust, who are making this work go. These are also the amazing people who work together to bring you the plan. I am really stunned by the talent we had with us. Economists, engineers, ecosystem mapping wizards, social media gurus, ecologists, and more, donating, as Gary said, many thousands of hours of their time. All of them bringing their particular talents to the project that I'm really proud to share with you tonight. I do want to especially thank Peter Lamb, Elizabeth White, and along with Gary Holman, who were instrumental in making this project happen. And in fact, you may not know, were the drivers behind the 2011 Climate Action Plan, which we also call CAP 1.0. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. But first, a couple of terms. Mitigation. Those are the things that we do to reduce human emissions of greenhouse gases from burning stuff or from putting other types of gases into the air. And examples of the burning stuff, think chimneys, tailpipes, and for gases, think cows, landfills, fridges. Now, adaptation is also another term that we'll be using tonight. And those are the things we do to prepare our communities and our ecosystems for the bad stuff that's very likely to happen as a result of the GHGs, or greenhouse gases, that we've already put into the air. So for adaptation, think about armoring or even moving Walker's Hook Road to prepare for rising seas, or pruning and thinning in our plantation forests to make our forests healthier and more resistant to fire. Not long ago, we could get away with just doing mitigation, but since that time, all those GHGs have gone up into the atmosphere or are being absorbed by our oceans, making them more acidic. Now we have to do both. lower our emissions, and get ready for the impacts of climate change that is already baked in due to stuff we did decades ago. We waited essentially too long to mitigate, so now we also have to adapt. So before you shut down your Zoom to pour yourself a strong one because of that news, which you likely already know, do know this. Everything we do that lowers emissions and helps our communities and ecosystems adapt to the changes that are already underway will help lower our future risks. In this presentation, I'm going to be outlining what our key climate risks are and talk at a high level about how we can address them to keep us and our ecosystem safe. Many people ask this question, but as you'd expect, reality is always more complicated. We haven't seen the global climate crisis movie before, and like any crisis, our normal playbook has to be thrown out. A crisis always means we have to color outside the lines to address it. That means systems, rules, processes, and even traditional behaviors don't work anymore for the new reality. Think World War II, think COVID, in fact. And we all know that systems can turn on a dime through bold action. Yeah, but on Salt Spring, you say, where we have trouble even painting the lines on the road? Sure, that's true, but Salt Spring isn't so special. Humans and their systems are surprisingly homogeneous across the world, and few governments are having an easy time with the climate crisis. What we've got on Salt Spring, however, is a bunch of passionate people who care deeply about this place. That's how we paint those lines, or outside of them, as the case may be. Ultimately, it means that the citizens who can do so need to get involved. We need to push our governments, our businesses, and our organizations to do more to make it easier for all of us to go carbon neutral. So who's our Bonnie Henry of the climate crisis going to be? Well, that's each of us, with whatever gifts we have along with business and government. I feel, though, that it all starts with how we talk to one another. We've been just a little poisoned by confrontation in this world, and even here in Shangri-La. But we are all going to, if we're all going to row in the same direction, we've got to connect and understand one another. So you're in a sinking boat. You bail the boat and you actually work together. And in doing so, you get it done faster. You know how it ends up if you stop to argue. It's those reflexes to collective action we all need to call on now. So let's talk about how we're going to bail the boat. So plans like this cost around $250,000 to produce. That's why you got so many recommendations, Gary. You got more than your 10. But thanks to the hard work of a lot of volunteers and donations, we spent a tenth of that. We were fortunate to have a whole bunch of super engaged volunteers and some over-the-top generous ones, that's you, Tara Stafford, who donated all the resources that led to the public consultation we did with great input from 2,000 islanders, more than 2,000 islanders. And caveat, it's not perfect. There may be errors. For a whole whack more money, maybe we could have made it perfect, but I kind of doubt it. There may also be some internal contradictions. So 30 plus people working on 6 topics across 4-dimensional problems, you can bet there are contradictions. Long story short, this plan is the best thing we've got for our community and a starting place to galvanize concrete action for some big changes that have the potential to benefit us all. You probably know, but if you don't, you can download the whole plan or most of it in one click at transitionsaltspring.com. There are also a whole bunch of other pieces that you can download separately, bite sizes, if you will, like an executive summary. If you're hopping on your own private jet and don't have time for details, that's the one for you. Or the piece that I really like on co-benefits, the co-benefits of climate action that's buried in the appendices. It talks about the many potential benefits of climate action, from economic development and diversification to economic fairness and inclusion. It's all there for you to get to know over the next while. 90 minutes with you tonight is enough to give you a quick tour of some of the key features of the plan, including the risks we're facing. We will, however, have almost a year to help you unpack the plan. Every 6 to 8 weeks or so, give or take, We're planning to work with respected community partners to provide programming to help you get as deep as you want into the recommendations we're making in each of the sections outlined in the plan. Starting in March, in fact, to kick us off, we'll take a deep dive into freshwater through Zoom presentations, articles, and social media, where we will lay out the issues and look at the solutions. We've got this stuff and more planned for you, but our ability to get it all done really does depend on you and our other funders to step up to make it possible. All of the public activities and programs that will happen will be part of the One Cool Island campaign. To be a part of One Cool Island, you can sign up for a newsletter. You can also become a monthly donor by signing up at transitionsaltspring.com, where you can also find out more about our activities. From $5 to $500, monthly donations make it possible to deliver programs like our planned Climate Action Coach program. That program is intended to help you make sense of all the incentive programs out there that can save you money and lower your emissions if you can figure them all out. We're ready to roll that out and are shopping around for funder partners right now to make it happen. Becoming a monthly donor also has other benefits. We're going to include monthly donors on special activities and offers. That's a way for us to get input from you on new initiatives, but it's also just a way of saying thanks to our donors for placing their faith in our hard work. In short, your donation helps us inspire islanders to take action in their own lives and keep climate action on the front burner for our decision makers. From electrifying buses, bikes, cars, and ferries to improving the health of our forests and fresh water, CAP 2.0 is packed with tangible solutions that are ambitious but achievable. So remember that slide I showed you a little while ago about mitigation and adaptation that I had up? This slide here represents the mitigation part. This is where we do things to bring down the amount of greenhouse gases that we put into the atmosphere. As I said, it's only part of the picture, but since it's up, let's talk about it for a moment. This shows our best assessment of emissions from selected sources in 3 time periods. We picked 50% emissions reductions by 2030 because it's consistent with local and international targets. The sources of emissions you see here are a perfect mix of direct and indirect sources of emissions. The direct ones are those we actually generate here, think cars, and the indirect ones are those that are generated elsewhere for stuff we use here, think clothing. Now, the bad news is that actual total emissions per capita are actually a lot higher because we didn't include some super hard to calculate categories like air travel and the stuff we buy. Well, the air travel is likely pretty easy to figure out now, but usually not. One indirect source included here, however, is food, which we included because we can calculate it, and 2, because it's just so large. I look forward, for example, to our public programming on food and agriculture in the next few months, where we can take a close look at this complex area and what we can do about it. Another thing you'll notice is that the wedge for logging, there's a blue wedge there that starts at 0 in 2007. And that's not because logging started in 2007, it's because we didn't collect data for that when the CAP first came out in 2011. Now we have data. The reason it's here is that our forests, and for that matter, our oceans, have huge potential to become even better tools for sucking carbon out of the atmosphere than they already are. Green forests, green carbon rather from forests, and blue carbon in the sea are areas that Transition Salt Spring is keenly interested in working on with funders and fellow islanders. Now, I want to switch tracks to talking about the climate risk we face. But first, we've got a poll which introduces some of our key risks and asks you to take your best shot at how much things will change in the next few decades. So Erin, take it away with the questions and I can read them out. So the first one you can read, but I'll read it out in case you're staring into space. What is the minimum increase in sea levels we can expect by 2115? The next question, back in 2000, we had an average of 40 frost days per year. By 2080, how many frost days are we projected to have? And back in 2000, our daily average summer high was 22.5. By 2080, what is it projected to be? So you've got those 3 questions. Erin or Darlene, you can keep me posted on how it's going, but aren't we a fun bunch? We actually sit around the table and do these kinds of questions for Trivial Pursuit night together. Not really, but I thought this would be a really good place to get us started on talking about some of the risks here.
Folks might need to scroll down in the polling box to see all 3 questions, since they are fairly complex, but just do your best guess at what you think the answer is. Choose the response that you think makes the most sense to you in terms of your understanding of the climate risks that we're facing. Got about 75 folks or so who've voted out of about 125. So we'll give it another moment here.
And after we get the results up, I'll talk about some of these and show you some pictures that line up with the data that we've got.
Just as we're coming to the end here, I'm also going to let people know that if you have questions for Brian or for all of us here at TSS about some of the information that we're sharing with you here this evening, please do put your questions in the chat box, and we'll be monitoring the chat box through the evening. I promise you we won't be able to answer all of your questions tonight, but it's really great to get a snapshot of the types of questions that people are having, so that over the coming months, as we're doing education programs and other public engagement activities, we'll hopefully be providing that information and getting you the answers to your questions so that you can be better informed and inspired. So I think we're probably at our, looks like voting has kind of leveled off there, Erin Ann. So maybe now we can end the poll and put up the results. Brian, can you see the results?
Yeah, I can. I just got to put it beside my legend so I don't make a mistake. Award the prize to the wrong person. Oh, wow. And number 1, it looks like people have my cheat sheets. I don't know if there's an aftermarket value for them, but that's actually correct. 1 meter is what we're looking at for sea level rises in 2115. So very good, folks. And for the next question about frost days, interesting. Okay, so the bad news here, it's actually 0. That's what we're looking at in 2080, which is a steep drop. And from question number 3, the answer is 29.5. So all the answers are pretty close, but definitely hotter. That's the key message here. So we can close the poll now. Thanks for playing along. So let's talk about that. So key to guiding climate action on Salt Spring is understanding the nature of the risks we face over the next several decades. To address that, we sought to outline our greatest climate risks on Salt Spring. And to accomplish that task, we created a set of climate risk maps and data that visually tell our story over the next 80 to 100 years. All of this was based on high quality, publicly available data from various academic and public sources, with the emphasis on various. It's not easy to find some of this stuff. The story that you're about to hear is not unlike the stories that are popping up in our news feeds every day from around the world. So here's a projection that we were able to model for Salt Spring for the decline in frost days. You know the answer already from the poll, but what are the costs? Consider these not so fanciful stories that could be coming to a driftwood near you. These are the scenarios we face on a frost-free Salt Spring. We're already seeing this shift, and all over the world, we're seeing ecosystems that simply can't adapt quickly enough to such rapid changes. A simple thing like frost days ripples out to many areas, all of which are interconnected. Consider rainfall as another example. We all know in our guts and anecdotally the winter rains are getting heavier and more frequent, but what are the consequences? Remember the Stewart Road closure a couple of years back? That's an example of an accelerating trend that gives you headlines like these. A destabilized ecosystem under torrential rains led to the collapse of infrastructure that simply wasn't built to sustain these kinds of pressures. What we do to our forests affects our roads. What we do to our roads affects our water quality, and so on. Then there's temperature, but this chart doesn't tell the full story. Average highs of 29.5 in summer by 2080 mean many more days of highs well into the 30s. Imagine summer peak temperatures of 36, 37, and you can imagine, based on recent experiences, what's likely to happen. These temperatures create ripples that will affect every aspect of our lives, including our safety. This summer's fires in the Western United States show us our future creeping north. Anything we can do to help our ecosystems stay moist and healthy will help our ecosystems, will help our communities stay safer from drought and fire. The longer we wait, the more expensive these fixes become, and the less time we have to enjoy the many co-benefits or other benefits that come with proactive climate action. The final data I will show you are the sea level rise maps. The upshot, we've got a lot of work to do. Underneath the colored layers is downtown Ganges. The teal green shows a 2020 king tide. And for those of you who don't know, those are the super high tides that come usually, I think, in October or November. Had to explain to me one time, but I can't remember why. And only 80 years from now, pictured in green, the lime green, king tides bring ocean water all the way up to the library. Next time you go to the library, take a look at the little creek that's back there, and it's not hard to imagine water coming up into the parking lot. The orange shows us the same time scale, 80 years away, same king tides, but with a 1.3 meter storm surge. The flooding in this instance cripples downtown, leading to closures, losses, and damage to infrastructure. Now, a lot of the land in this photo is fill land, that is rubble from construction sites, rock, concrete, moved soil. Areas like around the fire hall, as you may have heard, are experiencing problems with subsidence or uneven settling, one of the key climate change reasons why they need to relocate. These problems are also going to get a lot worse and more expensive if we kick the can down the road. Here we have Bettis Beach and the top of Fulford Harbor, where whole neighborhoods are affected and roads cut. The existing roadway at the top of Fulford will need to be a much longer elevated causeway over what could become an estuary at the mouth of Fulford Creek. For those of you who've looked at the archive sites or seen old pictures, there used to be a big long causeway that went across there. It looks like we have to dust off plans for that again. So all this data, sea level rise, temperature, frost, rain, have implications that put together ripple out to impact where and how we build, how we get around, where we grow food, and how our landscapes and ecosystems will change for better and for worse. Act now and we have choices. Wait and we have a lot fewer. The climate risk mapping we did provided us with an important context for all of the recommendations included in the plan. So there are a few major themes that are listed here that cut across the whole plan. Together, they are really the conditions we need to set up if Salt Spring is to lower its emissions and prepare for climate change's impacts. This will require us all to play a role together. It means not blaming our island's loggers, for example, for the livelihoods they make as hewers of wood. Instead, it means looking more dispassionately, maybe at the rules that dictate the massive road allowances required for subdivided land. Rules dictated by inflexible provincial building codes made for suburban areas based on really old world views about inexhaustible land supplies. At the end of the day, a plan is just that, a plan, unless we use it as a roadmap, which is why we are here tonight to do a little bit of travel planning together for the journey we're going to take over the next few months together. And there's a lot you can do. As I said earlier, here's a map of the journey we're going to take you on. 2011 is about helping you, our community, get familiar with the problems and the solutions. We're going to do our very best to engage as broad an audience as we can, because to fix this, we need to go way beyond what we call the choir into the congregation. As an example of some of the stuff we want to share with you, I'm about to show you a couple of slides, or infographics as they're called. They were produced by Transition Salt Spring and the Ecological Research Network, which is a working group of Transition for the Islands Trust. It's part of a public education toolkit that the Trust is developing to help us better understand how to keep our communities safe from the risks of forest fire, while protecting our forest ecosystems and their ability to provide us with services like clean water and summertime cooling. This picture shows a state that property owners really need to avoid if they want to promote forest health and reduce risks to personal safety from fire. As Acting Fire Chief Jamie Holmes liked to say, what we need to do is create defendable space around the things that we want to protect from fire. Mowing down all the trees isn't what would be called fire smart. In fact, a treeless landscape actually makes things worse, as this picture shows. A treeless, unfenced residential landscape that results in chewed up salal, dried out soil, erosion from excessive runoff, and an awesome habitat for broom and gorse, aka fire starter, isn't the way to go. But here's a happier place, and the co-benefits are many. This is the kind of thing we need an hour in a webinar to talk over with you, maybe with our local fire service there to answer questions. We can't do that today, but just know that this is a taste of the kind of programming we hope to roll out to you in the coming months. By the end of the year, we're hoping to have built our collective climate action muscles as a community. In the last provincial election, Adam Olsen's campaign manager shared with us that he had noticed a whole lot more talk about climate change when their team was talking with voters here on Salt Spring. Last time that was neighboring Saanich. This time it was here. And in September of last year, just before the election, Transition had just finished its large public engagement on the Climate Action Plan. For that, about 20% of our island's voters spent an average of 35 minutes on a survey that helped direct the thrust of this plan. And as a consequence, we think, helped influence people's thinking about climate change. That's powerful. And that's not just the choir either. And that is the kind of result we're hoping for by the end of this year, when we will all know what the issues are, what we need to do, and how we will get there together. Meanwhile, our hardy band of volunteers and paid part-time staff will be plugging away developing new initiatives for you and our community. One key initiative we've already started is the Salt Spring Climate Action Network, where the agencies, organizations, and levels of government that provide the services that make life possible on Salt Spring Island get together once a quarter to build their own climate action collaboration muscles. Tomorrow, in fact, the very first proposal to come out of that collaborative work gets submitted for possible funding. Wish us luck. It's our hope that this will be the first of many. So here we are, back to our One Cool Island. We hope you will join us. Together with your help, we can do this. Truth be told, without you, it simply won't happen. So please do sign up for our newsletter and become a monthly donor. We're excited for the road ahead. And I'm just going to stop the screen share and just a couple of last words as I end to say to you, to develop a plan like this that you've heard about this evening does depend on thousands of hours of countless volunteers. We're doing this work because we see the urgency of the crisis and are compelled to act. We're doing it because we love this place, this world, and dearly want to preserve it. But in addition to our volunteers, we also need paid staff to fund the ambitious work we've planned. And with that, we need your support. This is a time when each of us must ask ourselves, what can I do here and now to protect this place, this world that I love, this place I want future generations to enjoy? And so I ask you, and in fact appeal to you, will you accompany us? Will you help bail the boat? Thanks very much. We'll end there, and hopefully we'll have some time for questions before we have a chance to talk with Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Brian. That was fantastic. I don't know how you took climate action and turned it into a 15-minute presentation, but you did. It's really just such a joy to work with you. You are such a great communicator. We're really lucky to have you on our team. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Ditto, my dear.
So we didn't have any questions in the chat, interestingly enough. So people must know everything there is to know about climate change. That's fantastic. Although Robert is suggesting that you have a long, cool drink of clean water. So I think we'll take it into a conversation now with Elizabeth May. Elizabeth, if you're here with us and able to join us, that would be terrific.
I think Erin Ann's got to do that, I think.
Okay, Erin Ann, could you unmute Elizabeth? Got some technical stuff. So it does look like
There we go.
it does look like
Otherwise, I could present by doing charades.
right.
Sounds like.
So there was one question that we missed. So I'm going to pitch that over to you to see what response we can get. So was there Indigenous knowledge utilized alongside Eurocentric science in the creation of the plan?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's, I'm going to give an inadequate answer because I personally am inadequate in my kind of abilities in this area and the time I personally allot to these issues. But one thing that was interesting that happened while we were drafting the plan was that a 5-day long workshop was being held on Pender Island on Indigenous knowledge and climate change. And it was like, okay, someone has to go. I don't have time. So Erin Ann, go. So Erin Ann Harper went and we had conversations, and Erin Ann basically drafted a report after that came out. And I don't know how much it influenced the plan itself, but it certainly influences my thinking every day as I'm thinking about this place and why it is we need to protect it. And for example, we shared the plan, we sent it out to First Nations. Unfortunately, COVID made reactions to that challenging, but the door is open at every step to engage in a conversation with First Nations about our collective roles together in trying to fix this vexing problem. That's an inadequate answer, I know, but that's basically where we're at. Any other questions, Darlene, that came up?
One was, how are we going to involve the whole community, not just quote unquote stakeholders, just everybody?
Yeah, so it's a hard question in some ways. So stakeholders are those, they're organizations often that are called upon for a certain kind of input. Then there's public input, and I mean that happens at several layers, right? There are the people who are the quote true believers, and then there are folks everywhere in between, all the way to I don't want to hear about this. So we got to do our best to reach out to as many people as possible and bring them on the bus, because we're going to need a lot of people. And in fact, our political leaders need to see that there's a consensus in order to be able to get them to kind of, press the right button when it comes to taking super bold action. So we're transition. We're certainly there to help the public know about the issues and understand when important decisions are getting made so that they can exercise their right to influence those processes. And that's going to be an important thing that we do with you, and you do alone already, all of you, but we'll do our best to engage as many people as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we have a crack communications team. If you haven't already, do follow us on Facebook and Instagram and sign up for our newsletter. Those are really the best ways to stay connected with all the activities and educational processes and other ways to stay engaged over the next few years. We're going to be very, very busy. So please do come along with us, everybody. So I think I will take us now into our dialogue with Elizabeth May, just to take advantage of our time here together and recognizing it's about 7:25. So of course, I'm sure everybody knows Elizabeth, but you might not know that she is also a writer and a lawyer, as well as being an environmentalist and an activist of long standing. Of course, she used to serve as the leader of the Green Party of Canada, and she remains our Member of Parliament. So welcome, Elizabeth May. Super happy to have you here with us today.
Thanks a lot, Darlene. And thank you to Brian. I would start acknowledging where I am, traditional territory of Wasanich Nation. I'm here, Haishka Siam, to all of you. Thank you. It's an honor to be with you. It's an honor to be on these lands. And I'm here in Sydney. This is Parliament now. This is meeting with constituents. I'm here on Zoom all the time. So it's pretty darn weird. I'm very familiar with Zoom. And so is every member of Parliament now, because we are actually voting on Zoom, passing legislation on Zoom, debating on Zoom, talking about climate change on Zoom, asking the Prime Minister, what did he think about Joe Biden canceling fossil fuel subsidies? And he said he was pleased to see the United States following our lead, he said. How does he? Anyway, I won't get political about it, but there's some pretty You just actually want to fall over in shock at some of the things that get said with a straight face by people who know better. So when I read this plan, so that's next thing I want to say is this is so impressive. And I was sent an early draft, and I started, I thought, okay, well, Transition Salt Spring has asked me to look at the plan. Maybe I can give them some points. No, I couldn't. It was so really impressive looking at aspects of things that people forget in some climate plans, like the importance of forests, which comes through so clearly in this document, the importance of science. Now, this is one of the things that I want to share with all of you, and then I will not make a whole long speech. I know that there's so many people on this call who are experts. By the way, we're not all Salt Spring Islanders here. I've confessed I'm on Saanich Peninsula, but I see some really phenomenal climate activists from Pender. I see Julie Johnson's name there, and I don't know if Peter Carter is online, but we got an IPCC scientist living on Pender Island. We've got just tremendously knowledgeable people. I see Janet Halliwell on this call. We've got this community, the Gulf Islands in general. Wow, what a brain trust. And clearly what Transition Salt Spring has done with Elizabeth White's work and Peter Lamb's work and all of your work and Tara's work, amazing. So one of the things I want to say that really from the most foundational and important thing to understand is how much trouble we're in. And there's two kinds of denialism. We've dealt with the denialism of the Harper years. There's not really a problem. It doesn't matter. There's the denialism of climate leadership that says we care about this. It's really important. It's an emergency. Parliament passed a motion that we were in a climate emergency June 18th of 2019. And we know what it looks like when a government, now we do know firsthand. Oh yes, Galliano's here too, thank you. I saw Heather Martin's name for Galliano. I forgot to mention there are Galliano people on this call too. Well, and we know what it looks like now. We didn't know June 18th, 2019. We've never seen our government react to an emergency. Now we have, they reacted to COVID. They're still in a state of denial about the timing of climate change. They are in deep denial about how fast we have to move. And in a very strange way, something that sounds bold is the new tool of denialism, net zero by 2050. As Greta Thunberg says, net zero by 2050 in an open letter from the youth movement, the Fridays for the Future young people of the European Union. They wrote the European Commission and said, net zero by 2050 is surrender, quote unquote. Because if you think that that's what we're doing, which is frankly what I think Jonathan Wilkinson and the current federal government think, we're here in our heads, we're still in 2020. So let's leave it even. We got from 2020, we have to get to net zero by 2050. So we got 30 years. We don't. We should measure how much time we have left in months, not years, because it's not as though everything comes crashing down on our heads in 24 months. But honestly, I can't see how, if we don't move rapidly to meet the IPCC requirements to hold to 1.5 degrees, as this document tells us, because you start with the IPCC science, which, by the way, the new Government Climate Accountability Act, Bill C-12, never mentions the key reality of the IPCC 1.5 degree report that we have to reduce emissions globally by 45% below 2010 levels and do it by 2030. So the curve, the line isn't this, the line is, and then, so we could get to net zero by 2050 and be at 3 or 5 degrees Celsius. We could be, that's why I had trouble with the poll question saying, yeah, we may have, we're baked into 1 meter sea level rise by the end of the century, because the IPCC and all the peer-reviewed science says that's just the measurement of the ocean expanding because the water's warmer. We lose the Western Antarctic ice sheet, we get 8 meter sea level rise. So kind of our bets are off on adapting to 1 meter, because if we lose the Western Antarctic ice sheet, and that's, by the way, research that's something called the GRACE Project, that a scientist at University of Toronto is one of the key researchers globally. His name is Dick Peltier, and they measure how, well, it's very complicated physics, and they measure using satellite data how much it seems that the land masses are sinking, and they're able to measure what would happen if. And so the GRACE project, GRACE, you can look it up. It's fantastic. It's fantastic in terms of being really, really solid science. But we lose the Greenland ice sheet or the Western Antarctic ice sheet. It hits Canada differentially. It's kind of like water sloshing in a bathtub. We lose the Western Antarctic ice sheet, which is farther away from us. We have 8-meter sea level rise. It's slightly not as bad if we lose the Greenland ice sheet for us, but it's, for the other hemisphere gets the 8-meter sea level rise. We're playing with, well, you also quote Greta Thunberg in the report. Our house is on fire. Why are we acting like a house, we're acting as if the living room's on fire, but we're okay because we're still in the dining room. I mean, I'm sorry, house is on fire. You have to act like you're in an emergency. And we know that what government looks like when it's acting as if it understands we're in an emergency because of the way government reacted to COVID. We did something we've never done before. We voluntarily shut down all our economy. We essentially put our economy on a medically induced coma to wake it up later when it's safe. What are we doing about climate? We bought a pipeline. What are we doing about climate? We haven't replaced the target put in place the third time Stephen Harper weakened our climate target as a nation. That's the target we have now. We ignored a commitment we'd made in Paris to improve our target in 2020. When I talked to the Minister of Environment about it, they just didn't, well, that wasn't a binding target, wasn't a binding commitment. So we're in a situation where the work that you've done here is outstanding, and it makes the federal efforts look so weak. So let me just say, in reading this, what my job is, every place where you use Fed, that's okay. So I've been working to try to get the commercial freighters out of our waters for some time. It's now part of the climate action plan for Salt Spring, because we got to get that number to 0 by 2030. So that's on me. I did put in my pre-budget submission to Chrystia Freeland that we help Harbour Air become 100% electric, because that becomes an export for Canada, because nobody else has any airlines that have figured out how to get off fossil fuels except for Harbour Air. So let's try to get that done. Planting forests is a big part of my pre-budget submission to the Minister of Finance. And we are going to be seeing some substantial retrofit monies coming in the next budget. I'm pretty sure of this. That will expand from beyond homes, beyond residential eco-energy retrofits, to commercial buildings, to institutional buildings, to churches, to stores. We're going to help people. I'm pretty sure Chrystia Freeland's going to put this in the budget, help individual Canadians and communities access some funds for things like the heat pumps. And for things like, and now this is a big question, are we going to get solar panels on roofs in the budget or not? But we're certainly going to see money for better insulation, better windows, all that stuff. We're certainly going to see money in the federal budget, and Jim Stanton will be happy to hear this, for more electric vehicles, more electric chargers, more infrastructure to support the electrification of individual vehicles, which I hope, as Mina-Lee hopes, we'll use less and less and less. Okay, so I'm going to stop there just to say that I'm enormously grateful to everyone who worked on this document. I'm very, very encouraged to see such a huge turnout for the release of it. And it's lovely. It really is. It's really hard for me, isolated as I am, to stop from wanting to name everybody on the call that I miss. So I miss you. I'll just Andrea, Ron, Margaret, I miss you. I miss you, Krista. I love you all. I'm so sick of COVID, but it has shown us one thing. We now know that governments can act if they take a crisis seriously, and they don't take climate seriously yet. They think it's an important electoral issue to fool people, but you're showing them what it looks like when we take it seriously. So thank you so very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Elizabeth. It really means, coming from you, that means a lot to me personally. And on behalf of all of us at Transition, thank you. And thank you for being here. I want to actually chat with you. There are lots of questions I have. One of the things, you kindly accepted an invite to a workshop we've got coming up in March for policymakers and practitioners in the whole blue carbon, green carbon space. And that's I referred to in the presentation as being, you know, the potential for our forests and our marine environments to sequester carbon. And it reminds me of the plan that the feds did release a few months ago that's more ambitious than anything I've seen come out of Ottawa in a while, except for the Green Party platform. About the price of carbon and about an escalating price of carbon. And in your opinion, what does a significantly increased price per carbon do? What does it free up? What kind of things can we start to do that are a little more difficult to do now?
Okay, I have to admit, I'm not a big fan. I mean, I see carbon pricing as a necessary but insufficient condition to carbon action.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, I mean, when Paul Wells and Maclean's wrote that, quote unquote, Justin Trudeau is all in on climate action because the price of a ton of carbon is going to go to $170 a ton by 2030. I think, you know, basically the amount of climate science that Paul Wells has conveniently fits in a thimble with room for a gin and tonic afterwards. I mean, it's just appalling the kind of climate literacy of our national media. Yeah. So back to carbon pricing, what does it do? I don't know. They haven't measured it well in the that Healthy Environment, Healthy Economy document that they released December 11th of 2020, which was a dodge in order to get to be invited to the climate leadership celebrations of the 5th anniversary of the Paris Agreement. Canada is the worst performer in the industrialized world. Even after 4 years of Donald Trump, we're worse. That says a lot. It's, I think, appalling that the first phone call our prime minister has with Joe Biden is to complain that he canceled the Keystone Pipeline. He should have said, okay, you cancel Keystone, I'll see you and raise you one. We just canceled TMX. That would have been a great conversation. Mm-hmm. So back to what it does do. It's important to correct, if you're going to be in a market economy, it's important to correct the market failure that dumping carbon into the atmosphere is free. That has to be corrected as a signal. And that requires two things. It requires eliminating all fossil fuel subsidies, which we have not done. Although, by the way, Stephen Harper promised to do it in 2009. So that commitment's been out there in terms of, if you're serious, that's what it looks like. As a shocking parenthetical note, the late Auditor General Michael Ferguson, who died quite tragically a couple of years ago, his last report as Auditor General said that for the first time in the history of the Office of the Auditor General of Canada, a department of government had refused to give the Auditor General information in its possession. It was Finance Canada refused to tell the Auditor General what our fossil fuel subsidies are and in what pockets you can find them.
Yeah, that exists. Brian E. Penn has done some wonderful work on carbon inventories in British Columbia. And I spent half of an afternoon poring over an Excel spreadsheet with her in her wonderful yard. She's showing me basically, here are all the categories that are not included in our freaking reporting on carbon. And lo and behold, forests. So if you actually look at the emissions coming from all those slash piles that are basically barbecue starters all over British Columbia, that are at the hands of the forest industry, we have a major problem in terms of not only the safety of our forests and our communities, but also in terms of carbon accounting. It's basically a fraudulent exercise that's happening here.
So I mean, again, what will it do to take the price of a ton of carbon to $170 a ton? Also depends on how consistently it's applied. So we know that will be the price paid by provinces where they don't have their own plan. That won't apply to British Columbia, for instance. Right. It also won't. It also they return. There are loopholes and carve outs throughout. So I think what's happened is, in terms of the politics of it, a carbon tax became synonymous with climate action.
Right.
So if you were prepared to say you wanted a carbon tax, that equated to most of the general sort of public opinion as that's climate leadership. If you say we're going to go to a bigger number, they must have focus grouped the hell out of it before announcing it. That's where that's the kind of science when government spends the money, is how much is this going to affect our vote.
Yeah.
I'm very concerned that, I mean, that it's good. It's a very good thing. And obviously I support carbon pricing, but it will not get us currently everything in the so-called plan, which isn't a plan, that they released on December 11th, Healthy Environment, Healthy Economy, doesn't get us to Harper's target, which is erroneously described as the Paris target. Our Paris target is to hold global average temperature to 1.5 degrees Celsius and as far below 2 degrees as possible. The recent science has been released, makes it increasingly clear that 2 degrees is dangerous. 2 degrees isn't a target. At 2 degrees, we run an unacceptably high risk of catapulting into runaway global warming. So we have to hold to 1.5. The good news, we can hold to 1.5. We have all of the technology we need. We have all of the knowledge we need to hold to 1.5 degrees Celsius as a global community. And in all this gloom of how negative I've been, and I apologize to everyone, the good news is, which we can continue to celebrate, we mustn't lose sight of it, Donald Trump lost the election. Yeah. Woohoo! So now we have an actual, I can't believe it myself because I wasn't all that impressed with Joe Biden. I mean, really, but the appointments he's made and the executive orders he has signed are real. And John Kerry is the real deal. John Kerry was in Paris. He was the Secretary of State under Obama. He negotiated the Paris Agreement. And when he went to sign it at the Earth Day gathering that was brought together by Antonio Guterres at the United Nations in the General Assembly chamber, John Kerry brought his granddaughter up onto his lap. You don't do that if you're a fake. You just don't. You just don't dare. So I think John Kerry's the real deal, and he's describing climate now, and his appointment by Joe Biden is to the Security Council of the President of the United States. So they're saying, unlike Trudeau and company, who are still talking about climate change as an environmental issue, Biden's got it right, and John Kerry's got it right. This is a national security threat. This is a global security threat. It's an existential threat.
It's an emergency, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I wanted to take it down from actually to the kid down to on the lab level. And because I think that what we hear from a lot of people, this can be a bit too much. This is, it's overwhelming. And in fact, the kind of stuff you're telling us is very challenging for most people to kind of, grab hold of. What do you say to folks in this community who have this little recipe card called Climate Action Plan 2.0 in their hands? What do we say to motivate people not to run to the liquor cabinet and down the scotch, and actually get to work and mobilize and work with their neighbors? What would you say at this point?
Well, I would say personally, I regret giving up drinking for Lent, but that's a small point. We have more hope now than we had a year ago because the US economy is a big player. Canada's a big player too. We're one of the 10 most carbon emitting countries on the planet. So we know that what we do locally matters. But I'd also say I know a lot of the people on these screens, and we don't just do things locally, we do things loudly, nationally, globally. So so I'd say to everybody on this Zoom, all 117 participants and more, because some of you are doubled up. So you've got bubbles bigger than one, Yahoo. We've got to educate nonstop. I had the great honor this weekend. I got an email from Katharine Hayhoe, who I kind of worship, a couple of women on this planet. Greta Thunberg, Katharine Hayhoe, they're just amazing women. Katharine Hayhoe, if you don't know her, is a climate scientist from Canada who works in Texas. Talk about going into a place that you have to proselytize to the resistant, and she never gives up and she keeps trying. And her book is it's coming out in September by Simon Schuster, so I was writing a blurb for it. But she talks about what do we have to do as activists? talk about it. That's always what Catherine says. We got to talk about it. We got to find a way to talk about it with people who don't want to talk about it. And we want to make sure we approach, and this is what she said that I just love, coming from a climate scientist. She said, start every conversation with love.
Yeah.
You can't go in and assume that because someone doesn't think climate change is important because they're driving a Hummer, well, give them a break. Maybe there's some other thing that they care about that you can reach them about. Maybe it's that they're fly fishermen, or maybe what, I don't know, but her advice is always find a way to connect at a heart level. Don't inundate people with data, and don't be self-righteous.
Yeah.
Just listen to what they're saying and try to figure out where are they coming from? How do I reach them? And she's, oh my gosh, she's super smart. And I think it's good advice. So for all of us on this call, yes, work to implement Transition Salt Spring 2.0 climate action plan. Yes, as well, there's some good things coming in on the chat from Julie Johnston, but also be noisy. Now, how can we be noisy in COVID? We had 1 million people on the streets of Canada in September 2019. We can't do that in COVID. But letters to the editor pages, again, Globe and Mail. Talk about a desert that needs information, the Globe and Mail, or worse, the National Post. And the Times columnists, don't assume, in Driftwood, write letters to the editor, Vancouver Sun. Try to write a letter a week to different papers. You may get a letter a month published, and you're educating more people that way. And keep pushing our politicians. I don't give up on Justin Trudeau at all. I never will. I won't give up on Chrystia Freeland. They're in power now. Don't know how long they'll be in power. They're a minority parliament. They're not insensitive to this. I think the biggest problem we have with the federal government right now is that the evisceration of climate science within Environment Canada has not been reversed. So I don't think, believe it or not, I really don't think Jonathan Wilkinson, as bright as he is, and honest to God, I think as well-intentioned as he is, I don't think he understands the part of the, he doesn't get it. So it's something we can help explain to him. And if you have friends who live in his riding, please let them know that they should try to get a meeting with him on Zoom as his constituents. But somebody has to get the climate science through to these guys. They haven't had a climate science briefing for the whole cabinet. The advice that comes from Environment Canada bureaucrats isn't adequate to the emergency. Yeah. Thanks, Tara. Yes, he's the member of Parliament for North Vancouver.
Yeah, and
I should have mentioned it.
Speaking of Tara and some of the points you were raising, I was a student of Tara's while we were starting out this project from the point of view of really trying to understand how to talk to people about climate change and try and avoid the nasty binary, the evil them and the wonderful us. And showing up on this island with respect to logging, and we've got some name calling going on in some quarters about the eco radicals and the horrible forest vandals and all the rest of it. And my goal and our goal in transition is to step into that conversation. I see some of the chat reflecting that, and just simply dismantle that whole binary. And I got a lot of respect for the loggers on this island. They know a lot about our forests and how they work. I think there are some things that they may be able to learn from some other foresters on this island, like, folks who know a lot about permaculture, for example. So it's our goal at Transition to have some of these conversations, but not get into the yes, double S, no kind of divides that have really kind of poisoned our abilities to step up and have powerful conversations, as I think Jill was saying in the chat. We need to actually, as I was trying to refer to in the presentation, is one of the big skills we need to grow here is around talking to one another, because we are not going to be able to resolve this problem if we don't learn to do that. So I just want to say to you, Elizabeth, thank you so much for your amazing brain and your amazingly big heart. and your generosity and your connection.
Oh,
to
Brian. Oh, stop. Oh, go on with you, Brian. Go on with you.
No, thank you.
I'm morphing into some other character, but I will mention just so everybody knows, I hope not to go anywhere, right? I'm running again. I hope to be, I'm not stopping my work in any way until we solve this. I feel that this is, we are on the cusp of a major shift. We have disruptive technologies coming along. We've got disruptors of all kinds, including that, I keep saying it, oil is dead, but particularly tar sands oil is dead. Why they want to build a pipeline for a zombie industry is beyond. We've got to support those tree sitters in Burnaby, by the way.
Yeah.
Those guys really need help. We have absolutely got to stop the Trans Mountain Pipeline, and we've got to stop the logging at Fairy Creek. So I do see a future with more arrests, but on the other hand, we really have it right now at a point of such enormous change as possible because of COVID, that like the normal government policy processes are over. Things can change fast. So I apologize for taking too long. Thank you very much for inviting me, all of Transition Salt Spring. I really appreciate it. And congratulations on your wonderful work.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Thank you. I think are we handing it over to Ruth? Are you?
No, to Andrea. Erin, you might need to unmute. And let me see if I can do that. Andrea, does that work? There we go.
Yeah, you got it. Nice. Wow, Elizabeth. You have this incredible ability to terrify and inspire. And then at the end, we just love you and love each other more. I'm so grateful that you came on this call and that you're part of this community. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Andrea Palferman, and I'm on the board of Transition Salt Spring. After years of attending international climate meetings and seeing the speed of glaciers melting faster than the glacial pace of institutional change, I actually feel more empowered in a group like this and by the action I see right here in the Salish Sea than I do at the UNFCCC. No offense to you climate scientists and people out there working on that policy level, which is important. It's just not my happy place. This is. So we're really lucky here on Salt Spring because we have this clearly defined boundary that tells us who we are, like who we're responsible to and who we belong to as well. Land-rich and visionaries and activists and people with their hands deep in the soil, people with their feet solidly in the sea. We're also a place where people sleep in their cars outside 10,000-foot vacation homes. So we're really only going to get to be the artsy, kick-ass, creative community that we fancy ourselves to be if we take guidance from the people who may not be experts in climate science, but who know intimately what poverty feels like, who understand the sting of racism, and who have struggled to find their footing in a gentrifying community. Those folks are the experts in adaptation. We'll be so much richer if we include everyone, especially people who are very uncomfortable indeed with the status quo in this vision that we're talking about tonight. One cool island. So what does that mean? It means housing justice. It means addressing inequality. It means taking on decolonizing our institutions and our own minds. If we work together and embrace the full diversity that makes this place so freaking fantastic, could we reduce emissions and make it a more equitable community in the process? I think we can, and we must. Now it's my honor to introduce Jessica Harkema. She's a Salt Spring Island born and raised marketing and management genius. She's also a silversmith and jeweler. I hope I haven't outed you by saying this, who enjoys reading and exploring every nook and cranny of the West Coast. And she's a fantastic human. Over to you, Jessica.
Thank you, Andrea. So I've actually been asked to speak about why I joined Transition Salt Spring in such a monumental year, especially because I'm a bit of an outlier. I'm not an environmentalist or what I was recently referred to as a greenie, nor would I say I'm up with the green movement. Instead, I think I'm just simply a young person hoping to live 40 to 50 more years on this planet, intending to leave it in a better place than it is today. And ideally, I would do that on Salt Spring. I know that climate action is the only way forward to ensure myself, my peers, and the generations behind me are able to do so. As a member of TSS, I'm hoping to bring a little bit of a balanced view through my network on Salt Spring, connecting to the general and more specifically the younger population that may otherwise feel isolated by such grand and overwhelming plans, especially while we're just trying to make ends meet and figure out how we're going to get through the next 40 to 50 years of our life. I also plan to speak up about the issues that my generation sees as the most urgent and how we can use climate action as a tool to help solve them while doing good in our community. For those who don't know me, although Andrea just said it, I was born and raised on Salt Spring. I also come from one of the old timer families. So my personal, emotional, and professional investment in this community is huge. Over the last 20 years, I've seen the slow changes on the island. Some changes moving us away from addressing climate change and others moving us a little bit closer. I still remember when I was in the 6th grade, we learning about climate change, and many of the issues that we spoke about then are still the same issues we're speaking about in this CAP 2.0 plan, which is kind of scary. But I can't wait to be in your seat in 20 years down the road, listening to a 30-year-old Salt Springer say, I remember when we discussed these issues in the 6th grade, and over the next 10 years, I saw our community make the changes necessary to address them. Today, we're net zero, perhaps better, and leading other small communities in their quest to become net zero as well. That's why I'm part of TSS. So it saddens me a little bit when I look at the 125, currently 109 people in attendance, and I don't see that many people from my peer group online, but it really warms my heart that you're all here trying to leave Salt Spring and our planet in a better condition than it is today. And with all of our efforts, I'm quite sure that we can succeed. And I believe with the board that we're currently have and the team behind us and all the working groups, that TSS really has it in them to do it. So that's really why I'm part of TSS. So thank you.
Thank you, Jessica and Andrea. Thanks to both of you. It's such a crack team. I feel super, super lucky that I get to work with these amazing people every day. We have one, as we're heading into our home stretch here, we're about to close, but we have one last poll. Erin Ann, if I could get you to launch the poll. Here at Transition Salt Spring, we'd love to know more about how we can support you to keep learning and taking action on climate change. So what are the best ways that we can help you to learn more and do more on climate action? If you can take a look at some of these options down here and choose your top few, you can choose a few, it's multiple choice, so you can choose maybe the top 2 or 3. Great, thanks everybody. That's just going to give us some more information to help us guide our activities. We are recording this session. Jill had asked if this recording would be available. So we'll do our best to make sure that this is up on our website or available to others in a good way. The best way to stay connected to us is to sign up for our newsletter, and we'll have links and all kinds of things coming your way, hopefully including this one pretty soon. So educational events seems like it's coming out on top, and we got connecting media incentive programs coming up around the back end. No, and now we got more info on the website, more how-to info on the website, 45% catching up to connecting me to incentive programs. Oh, what else? Newsletter, no, educational events. Okay, we're doing pretty well here. Let's see, maybe give us another 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and Erin Ann, you can close the poll. Looks like educational events comes out way on top, which is makes complete sense. We've all gotten very Zoom friendly in this time, so and we're getting a little bit more Zoom friendly ourselves and learning how to do this. So thanks. Newsletter is up there, connecting you to incentive programs. The Climate Coach wasn't so big, but hopefully you'll be learning more about that program, as Brian mentioned earlier. That's kind of a person, not just information and websites, but an actual person, a coach who can come and actually meet with you and talk with you directly about the kind of home retrofits and other actions that you can be taking on your property, in the forests surrounding you, and in your home. So we know here on Salt Spring that it's person-to-person action that has the biggest impacts. And coming up a close fourth is more how-to information on the website. Okay, we'll get going on all those things. We can. So thanks so much, everybody. Just as we're ending here, I am going to just remind you about our website and signing up for our newsletter if you haven't already. Thinking about potentially becoming a monthly donor at TSS. A big thank you to everybody who showed up here this evening. In particular, thanks so much to Elizabeth May and Gary Holman, Brian Young, Andrea Pulverman, Jessica Harkema, and all the rest of the folks on the board of directors of Transition Salt Spring, who we're all privileged to work with. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for opening your hearts. Thanks for opening your minds. We look forward to connecting more and more with you. Please reach out. We're going to do our best to get you what you need so that we can all do this this challenge of our lifetimes together in the best way possible. So thanks, everybody. Good night.